Hello, Michael here. I'm the creator of wlbot or WeatherLink Bot. This is a node-based CLI that's going to help you make some of the most common API calls for Davis Instruments WeatherLink V2 API. What I want to show you today is how to install it and how to make your first API call, because that's where I find some of the most common questions come up. It's when you're trying to get off the ground and start using this tool. In the video description below, I will link to the open source GitHub repository for this tool. Everything is open sourced, it doesn't cost anything, it's totally free. I will also link to the NPM repository page for this package. Again, I'm not charging for this tool, it's really just kind of there for you as a utility, so you don't have to worry about all the authentication and some of the behind the scenes work. There are two things that I'm going to assume you have done before continuing with this video. The first is obtaining your WeatherLink API key. I will also link in the video description below to the WeatherLink developer API documentation, and this will walk you through the first step on how to get your API key and secret. The big thing to remember is your API secret should never be shared with anyone. Once you have those values, the second thing you're going to need to do is set up several permanent environment variables on your machine. Now, in this GitHub README, also on the NPM README as well, I've got links to discussions on how to set environment variables if you're on Mac OS and Linux or on Windows. If you're on Mac OS or Linux, it'll probably be a little bit easier since you'll just be able to edit your bash RC or ZSH RC file. On Windows, it might be a bit more complicated. These are the three environment variable names you need to set, and then these are those values. So the API key and secret you'll obtain from your WeatherLink account, and then the base API URL is the same for everyone, because that is where we're going to make your API calls to. There are two ways to install wlbot. The first is through this NPM public-facing repository. The second is to install it manually via this GitHub repository. I am going to just show you how to install it via via NPM, since that is just going to be the easiest for most people, but do know you can install it manually. There are only two real requirements that you need to have installed on your machine. The first is NPM itself. So if you run npm-v, you should get a version back, and then if you'll also need Node.js installed, so if you run node-v, you should get a version installed as well. You don't need anything super new, but versions of both of these tools that are relatively recent should be good enough. And then to be able to install wlbot, all you're going to need to do is run this command, npm install. We're going to use the -g modifier to install it globally, so you can call wlbot from anywhere, no matter what directory you're in, and then wlbot for the package name. If you want to double check that command, you can check it from the npm package listing as well. So I'm going to run a sudo just to make sure we don't run into any issues. Install, or I is just a shorthand, -g wlbot. This will go through. You'll need an internet connection for this. It'll go out and grab all the dependencies, install them for you. It'll take a few seconds, and what you should see is no warning messages, and it's added 36 packages. Perfect. So, congratulations, wlbot is now installed. You can call either just wlbot itself or -h for help. This -h modifier will be your friend. Any command you want to know how to use, tack this -h on the end of it, and it'll spit out something similar to this. And this is telling you, this is the CLI for the WeatherLink Live API, and here are the commands you can call. The handy one that you're going to want to check right away is wlbot config. And what this is going to do, it's going to display the values of those three environment variables that are needing to be consumed by this package. And why this is going to be handy is if you run it, you will get back these three environment variables, and they should have the correct value set. Now, what I've done here is I've actually protected the entire values for these environment variables, because remember, this API secret should never be shared, and your API key can be shared, but it's just good practice to keep it to as few people as possible. If you really want to make sure that these values are correct, you can run wlbot config -l, and what this will do is it will show these entire values. Again, be careful not to share those values with anyone that you don't intend to. The next API call that'll be helpful is knowing which stations your WeatherLink API or your WeatherLink account has access to via the API. So we can run wlbot metadata. Remember, metadata here is it's going to be a subcommand to get all of the metadata routes from the WeatherLink API. So we can run wlbot metadata mine, and this will search for stations, and this will tell me that 3 stations have been found on my WeatherLink account, and these are those station IDs. The next, probably most common API call you're going to want to make is getting the current weather. So you can do WeatherLink Bot weather, which will get you the weather subcommand, and we'll want to do the current weather, and then we'll give a station ID here. Maybe we'll give 132099, and that'll go through, and it will spit back a JSON response of all of the different data structures that contain the weather for that station. The other thing I want to highlight is some of the advanced capabilities of this CLI. So I'm going to paste in a command here, and what I want to walk through here is we're going to call WeatherLink Bot. We're calling the weather subcommand, but instead of getting the current weather, we're actually going to get the historic weather. This will be a station ID that my account has access to via the API. This is the start Unix time and the end Unix time. Remember, for a historic weather record, we can go up to 24 hours between start and end time. And the key here is this -R option, which is the raw option. And instead of spitting back the API response in this pretty formatted JSON, we're going to leave it as just a string of text. And we're going to pass it over to JQ. And JQ is a command line tool which can help parse and do really cool things with JSON data. And what we're going to do here is we're going to grab all this sensor data, and we're going to select the sensor types, right, that we want. And we're going to grab each of those historic weather records data, and we're going to find the maximum wind speed throughout each increment in this time period. And I want to know what the highest wind speed was. So if I go and run this, I've passed all this data, I've made an API call, passed it to JQ, and JQ is telling me that in this time period, the WeatherLink API is reporting that the highest wind speed was 13.81 miles per hour. And this is some of the really powerful things that you can get into is using this -R option. You can create your own scripts, pass it to JQ, do your own data manipulation, and WeatherLink Bot is just the vehicle to be able to pull that data from the API for you in a much more user-friendly way that's kind of more wordy and hopefully more intuitive for you. Anyways, that's all I wanted to share. Feel free, if you run into any issues, to open a GitHub issue, and I'll do my best as I have time to get back to you in a timely manner. Thanks.